чужин, забуваючи про самого головного ворога. Час для кожного.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. Your support is very, very much appreciated. Had a lovely email from Georgia at Cardrona. It appears that they all enjoyed the review, so it's all very cool at the end of the day. So, on to today's episode of the show. As you can see from the title page, we're looking at a brand new range that's been released by Brave New Spirits. And I deliberately kept the title page fairly plain because I wanted you to see the labels in their full glory. And are they cool labels? They are indeed very, very cool labels, it has to be said. But before we get too carried away, labels, packaging, frippery, as you well know, all indeed secondary to the juice in the bottle. If the juice in the bottle isn't any good, well, there's no point in going any further, is there? So we will be looking at said juice, but my God, they are great labels. And I must admit, I do like what Brave New Spirits are doing. I mean, I love their first range, the Voodoo whiskies. That really appealed to me. And again, thankfully, there were some good whiskies within that range. And I kind of get the feeling that they're a bit of a restless bunch. You know, they're never quite satisfied. It's kind of like, yeah, okay, we've done that range. Oh, I mean, you know, when they released that, they released a second range at the same time called the Gorilla Cask. But I remember Paul saying they actually didn't really like the name Gorilla Cask and weren't going to carry on with it. It's like, well, somebody must have liked it to start off with. Then the next range that comes out is the film-inspired range, the Cask Noir range. Interesting. Then along comes a single cask range called Yellow Label. I mean, that was a little bit of a naff name, it has to be said, guys, come on. And now we have Whisky Heroes. So yeah, this is all superhero themed, and yeah, like I said, the labels are really, really cool. And obviously, you know, they're going to stand out on the shelf. But of course, as a punter, you look at them and you think, well, yeah, is what's inside any good? And of course, if you don't get the opportunity to taste them, then you're never going to know. But unfortunately, I'm here to hopefully guide you through that one. Although, in saying that, if you have signed up to next month's Gauntlet's Whisky Tasting Evening, you will get the opportunity to taste them, because Paul from Brave New Spirits will be hosting the evening, so you will be able to get to taste these ones. But if you're not able to make it, and all the tickets have indeed been sold, or you don't live in Nottingham, then you're just going to have to rely on what I think of them. So, anyway, not much else to say apart from let's take a look at today's lineup. Okay, so one of the things I did find a little bit disappointing again is that they do seem to be obsessed with cask finishing and all that kind of stuff, and there's very few wholly American oak aged bottlings. Although the first one we'll be looking at is it is a first fill bourbon cask. So this is the oldest whiskey in the release. This is a 16-year-old secret Speyside. It's called Adventures in the Meadow. It is a second fill bourbon cask, sorry, cask number 48, distilled in 2007, bottled at 54.7 and bottled earlier this year, as all of these were. Bottling number 2 is called The Awakening. This is a 13-year-old Linkwood, bottled at 53.3%. It is a refill Oloroso sherry butt number 307313 and distilled in 2010. Bottling number 3 is called Agent Ivy Trapped. This is a 12-year-old Blair Athol, bottled at 55.1, and it's a first fill Oloroso Barrique finish, cask number 308050, distilled in 2011. Bottling number 4 is called an Eerie Silence, and this is a 13-year-old Milton Duff, distilled in 2010, bottled at 53%, and it's a single Oloroso sherry butt number 60. Penultimate bottling is called A Call to Submission. This is a 14-year-old Cameronbridge grain. It is bottled at 50.3% and is a single Pedro Ximenez hogshead, number 314835. And the final bottling is a bit of peat, thankfully. Always enjoy finishing with a bit of peat. This is called The Haunting Songs, and it is a 12-year-old Caol Ila, bottled at 51.6% from a first fill Oloroso Hoggy, and distilled in 2012. So, interesting lineup. Hopefully they'll all be intriguing, and well, we shall find out, shall we? Right, okay, so let's kick off with the secret Speyside. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? It's a nice nose. It's got some lovely maturity. It's got some of that kind of straw-like barley, white fruits, touch of citrus, a little bit of green fruit, but quite a lot of granitiness. In actual fact, I mean, if I was tasting this blind, I would have assumed it was probably more of a Highland than a Speyside. It certainly says more Highland character to me, so I'm not going to try and speculate on which distillery this is, because I'll probably get it wrong. But yeah, it's got a lovely nose. Like I said, quite fresh, quite mineral. Nice amount of maturity, some sort of straw-like barley, that kind of thing. So not a huge amount of oak. There's a little bit of cream, a little bit of vanilla coming through, but obviously being sort of second fill, it's not really imparted a huge amount of character on it. But there's enough there to give it some balance. So let's see what it passes like. You can taste that alcohol, that's a bit masked. Fresh, citric, again very mineral to start with. I get the barley, the white fruit, touch of apricot coming through, a little bit of straw. The maturity is starting to come through right on the mid palate. A little bit of oak starts to creep in, and then the alcohol kind of masks the finish. Great progression, really, really impressive. Lovely whiskey. Let's put a little drop of water with that and see if it opens things out. That's really emphasised the citric notes. I'm getting sort of orange, tangerine, lemon, mandarin. I mean, that's a lovely nose. Doesn't feel quite so mature now because it's kind of emphasised the citrus and emphasised the sort of the granity, fresh notes. I mean, this cask could have probably carried on for a few more years, it has to be said, but you know what, it's in a lovely place. Let's see what it passes like. That's filled out really nicely. I'm getting soft honey now, more white fruit again. The citrus notes have become more orangey, more tangerine-y. Not quite so granity, not quite so fresh on the palate, which is why it feels a lot fuller. A little bit more oak as well. Touch of wood spice on the finish. Yeah, that is a lovely whiskey. Really like that. Love the progression. Either neat or with water, I think that is an absolutely fantastic cask. So yeah, great stuff. Okay, so let's move on to the awakening. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Quite oily, quite fragrant. A little high tone for a Linkwood, it has to be said. But there's some lovely barley notes. A little bit of almost kind of pollinated flowers, you know, sort of pollen. Not a huge amount of sherry, really nicely balanced, subtle sherry notes. Just a little bit of dried fruit, a little bit of earth, a little bit of licorice. I mean, as you can see from the colour, that cask hasn't imparted a huge amount of sherry, which is really good because I like Linkwood. I think Linkwood's a lovely whiskey, and you can certainly get plenty of the distillery character coming through. So, yep, ticks my boxes. Let's see what the pal's like. Luscious, creamy, juicy, chewy, malty, dense, rich. Lovely Linkwood, really lovely Linkwood. Touch of dried fruit coming through. Lovely spicy finish. I'm getting sort of ginger, sort of powdered ginger rather than root ginger. A little citrus peel, some earth. Actually shows possibly a little bit more maturity than I would expect for a 13-year-old. It's probably more the sort of the sherry component, giving it that sort of slight oxidative dried fruit kind of mature feeling to it. So absolutely gorgeous balance, lovely whiskey. And although it's 53%, I really don't think that needs any water at all, but I will give it a little splosh to see what happens. Well, what little sherry character that was there originally has well and truly slunk off, and it's now full on white fruits, Linkwood, oily, slightly honeyed character. Oh, that's gorgeous. That's lovely. That is just a beautiful nose. A little bit of white chocolate as well. Let's see what that's like now. Quite floral now. Summer flowers, summer meadows, that kind of thing. No, don't really get any grass, but I get the sort of, you know, flowery kind of notes. Quite juicy again, not much in the way of sherry notes. It's just a little smidge just kind of pops up right on the finish, but you know, that is very much about the sort of luscious, juicy, honeyed fruit character of the spirit, and that's really, really good. I think, again, it's another one of those whiskies that either with or without water is absolutely gorgeous. I think some people might prefer it without water because it does get a little bit floral when you put a little drop of water with it, but for me, just another beautifully balanced whiskey. Okay, so let's move on to Agent Ivy Trapped. So 12-year-old Blair Athol. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Quite fresh, quite herbal. I mean, although it's, again, fairly light in character, the sherry notes are actually really quite noticeable. It's malty. It's again, I'm getting Blair Athol character, but I'm not getting a huge amount of complexity. It's very straightforward. It's very kind of, it's not quite a sherry monster. There's a lot of sherry and there's a lot of maltiness, and that's about it really. Now, I mean, there's going to be some of you that are going to love this, and it is one of those kind of like peculiar whiskies that you sort of look at and you don't expect the sherry to be quite so heavy because of the colour, which there goes to show that really you shouldn't actually pay much attention to colour, should you? Yeah, I mean, it's a good cask. I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it whatsoever, apart from the fact it's a little bit straightforward. Touch of grass maybe coming through now. Anyway, let's see what that's like. Excuse me. Quite juicy, fruity. Again, more of the Oloroso fruits, which seems to have got me by the throat, as they say. Again, it's relatively simplistic. It's pleasant, it's full, it's malty, it's juicy, but there isn't really a great deal of progression. There isn't really a great deal of depth to it. It's a bit, you know, here I am, this is what I'm about kind of thing. And you know, it's like I said, it's a pleasant whiskey. I'm going to put a little drop of water with it and see whether that does anything to it or not. Yeah, so let's see what the nose is like now. Slightly oilier, slightly fuller, a little bit edgy now, it has to be said. I mean, it's not detracted, it's not really sort of changed my opinion of it. It is pretty much straightforward. Let's see what it passes right now. Sweeter, an awful lot simpler. What complexity it did have doesn't really seem to have been retained once you put the water with it. Again, it's pleasant, it's a nice whiskey, but it just doesn't really sort of have the interest of, say, the previous two. So yeah, so that's Agent Ivy for you. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Miltonduff. So this is a full-on Oloroso sherry button, as you can see from the colour. No, it's not mega dark, but anyway, let's see what we get. Dense, very chocolatey, quite raisinated, very grippy. There's quite a bit of tannin, treacle. There's almost a kind of a medicinal tarriness there as well. I wonder whether this Oloroso cask originally, I wonder whether it's a refill Oloroso cask that possibly might have had some Islay whiskey in before. Although that sort of medicinal note is kind of quite fleeting, and I do find Miltonduff generally to be quite a herbal style of spirit. And there is a little bit of herbalness there, a bit of green olives. I mean, it's okay. I can see people being attracted to it. I think if you like sherried whiskies, this has got a little bit more than just the sherry going on, I think. But then again, it's another one of those ones where you have to sort of know what the character of Miltonduff is to be able to say, well, I think I can get some. Miltonduff character, that is. It's got a good complexity. There's plenty of wood character. There's more interest on the nose than there is on the previous bottling. A bit of creaminess as well. I love the chocolatiness. I mean, I'm a bit of a sucker for a bit of dark chocolate, as you well know. So, let's see what pass on. Soft, earthy, gritty, winey. It kind of has me more in mind of a kind of late harvested wine finish than an overt Oloroso cask. I mean, it's not as dark and raisinated as I would expect. It's lighter, it's more sultanery, quite waxy, green olives. So almost got that sort of earthy, botrytis-y kind of character. There's that little bit of almost medicinal menthol, tar, treacle. Treacle comes through right on the finish. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, again, it is very heavily cask orientated. There is some Miltonduff character if you know what you're looking for. And I'm kind of okay with that. You know, it's never going to be a style of whiskey that I'm going to sort of, you know, wet myself over at the end of the day. But you know, I can see what they're getting at with this. I can see it's quite appealing to the right person, I suppose. Okay. Getting more kind of Miltonduffy herbalness now. The sherry has kind of just dropped off a little bit. It's still got that slight medicinal note running through it, which I think is quite intriguing and not something I would ordinarily expect from Miltonduff at all. quite full, quite sort of marzipan-y. Yeah, that's a nice nose. Let's see what pass on. Like the nose, getting more of that sort of herbally, Milton Duffy kind of maltiness. A little short now, a little bitter. The tannins are bittering quite a bit on the finish, which is not a problem. I mean, it kind of adds to the complexity angle, I suppose. A little bit of coffee. Yeah, overall, it's. I think if you wanted a sherried whiskey, I think this is certainly going to fit the bill, to be honest with you. I think it's got enough complexity, it's got some sherry character, there's a little bit of distillery character, and I think it keeps everybody kind of happy, if you like, so, yeah. Okay, so let's move on to a call to submissions. So this is a 14-year-old Cameronbridge. Bit on the young side for a grain, but there we go. Let's see what the nose gives us anyway. Oh my word! What the hell is going on here? This smells more like a rum. It is really loads and loads of treacly dried fruit, green herbal potpourri, green spices, almost medicinal, toffee, coffee. There's a grippy, grainy kind of intensity, but it's really, really rummy. This is a sort of nose that you're just going to stick your nose in the glass and go, my God, what the hell am I sniffing here? And it's unusual, to say the least. I mean, obviously that rumminess is all the PX kind of character. I mean, but then the dried fruit of the character of the spirit is going to tie in with that, and is going to kind of emphasise this kind of rumminess. It's interesting. I mean, there's a little bit of sweetness coming through now, getting a almost kind of banana-y vanilla sweetness. It's not everybody's cup of tea, I will give you that. But it is interesting. It's certainly a sort of one of those debatable whiskies. Let's see what the pass like. Juicy, full, treacly, rummy again, slightly mentholated, loads of raisinated soft fruits, dried fig, prune, plum, bitter finish, tart, citrus and bitter wood, and nippy spice, grain. That's not a shrinking violet, it has to be said. I mean, that's got plenty of character, which is, well, good. Again, like I said, I don't think it's going to be a whiskey for everybody. It's going to be a whiskey for rum lovers, it has to be said. I think, if you like your rum, you're certainly going to sort of find some common ground with that. It's actually got quite a lot of alcohol for 50%, it has to be said. I'm getting quite a tingling sensation, which is a bit of a surprise. I wasn't expecting quite so much of that kind of character. No change to the nose, it's pretty much exactly the same. It's a little bit more toastiness, toasty oak kind of character now, I suppose, but it's still big, treacly. Let's see what that's right. Less bitter, sweeter now. I think sort of for some people that's probably going to be quite a relief. Really juicy, mouth-watering in actual fact, but not from the alcohol, from the sheer weight of juicy, treacly PX fruit. Little bit of a graininess still comes through on the finish, so there is an element of balance there, shall we say, but it's a lot of fun. And like I said, if you like rum, and you like that big, rich, kind of powerful style of rum, you're going to really warm to this. If you don't, it's not going to be your kind of cup of tea. But personally, I like it. It's interesting. It's not something I would want to drink all of the time. I'd probably get I think my mouth would probably get a little bit sort of saturated by it after a while. So, but finally, on to the Caol Ila. So 12-year-old Caol Ila, first fill Oloroso Hoggy. See what the nose is like. Big, rich, barbecuey, smoky and meaty. Chunk of medicinal peat, tar, treacle, raisinated cherry fruit, peat and cherry. Love it. Who doesn't love a bit of peat and cherry at the end of the day? It's got a lovely coastal note kind of coming through. It certainly seems to appear to have been spent plenty of time on Isla. It's got a lovely saltiness. It's got the sort of there's almost a little bit of barley kind of coming through. Maybe I'm kind of searching for it possibly, but it is primarily barbecued meat, peat and cherry. Can't argue. Let's see what the palate's like. Fresher, saltier, more herbal Oloroso, green pepper, capsicum, green peppercorns, green nuts. It's really green, very green mid palate, it has to be said. Not quite so sort of overtly treacly. There's a lovely astringency there on the finish, sort of, slightly medicinal peat note. I mean, come on, you really got to go some to cock up a Caol Ila at the end of the day. I mean, it can be done. It has been done. And yes, you could argue that this is peat and cherry, but I like the palate. I think the palate's got a lot more going on than the nose. I like the sort of progression of the palate. I love the intensity. Lots and lots of saltiness. I mean, a lot of Caol Ilas that you do get that have been bottled by independents do seem to be sort of somewhat lacking on the saltiness, and you assume that they've probably spent quite some time on the mainland, but this has got saltiness and coastal character by the bucketful, and that's probably going to turn out that it's spent its entire life on the mainland, and I'm just talking out in my butt, but as the case may be. But anyway, less sherry, more of that fresh white fruit, touch of banana, some apple. A lot more spirit distillery character kind of coming through now. Now the shot of sherry is just trying to drop off a little bit. Even a little drop of honey as well. Lovely nose. Really, really love that. Let's see what the palate's like. Less intense, less green, less sherried, more barley, more distillery character, still quite salty. Chewy, almost banana-y fruit, lovely spicy notes on the finish. That's doing it for me, it has to be said, just knocking back that sherry component, and we're getting a lot more distillery character. Yeah, that's certainly a lovely whiskey now. I mean, not that I'm saying that it wasn't a lovely whiskey when it was without water, but I think with water that has just become so much more. And right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show. Well, like I said, firstly, a big thank you to Paul at Brave New Spirits for the samples for today's episode of the show. Always very, very much appreciated, and like I said, that if you have a ticket for next month's whiskey tasting evening, then you'll obviously get the opportunity to taste these and make up your own mind. And like I said, I mean, at the end of the day, I can only give you my opinion, and I try and keep as much of a sort of a kind of an abstract sort of opinion to a certain extent. You know, you are sort of that. As I've often said, you know, that when you taste whiskey, it's not just about tasting whiskey. You're tasting it in for several reasons. You're either tasting it, certainly if you're judging a whiskey, then you're tasting it for balance, complexity, and that kind of thing. If you're tasting it as a whiskey to sort of like to basically sell to somebody, to you, the customers, then you're kind of looking at reasons for why you would want to recommend that whiskey. And sometimes it might not be a style you particularly like, but you obviously have to realise that there are people that like that kind of style, so it has to be a good variant of that kind of style. Secret Speyside, absolutely gorgeous, lovely maturity, very Highlandy kind of character, very granity, really very impressive. Linkwood, I like the balance, very light on the Oloroso, so plenty of Linkwood character. You know, certainly ticked all the boxes for me. Agent Ivy, I'm afraid, was a little bit of a disappointment, a little bit simplistic. Yes, you could argue that there certainly was Blair Athol character there, and I wouldn't disagree with you on that, but the complexity level just wasn't there for me. Milton Duff, I think, is going to be one that I think a lot of people will like because of the sort of chocolatey nature of the sherry. I would argue that there is a little bit more to it than just that. There is, but you have to know what the Milton Duff character is to kind of pick it out. Certainly more of that kind of comes through once you put a little drop of water with it. So on the whole, I would say again a really nicely balanced whiskey. The call to submission, well, it's just a bit bloody weird, really, isn't it? I mean, it's a whiskey that thinks it's a rum at the end of the day. Lots and lots of PX kind of character. But again, it has some interest. It's not just a one-trick pony. It's not just one-dimensional. It's not the whiskey for everybody. Some people will love it. Some people will hate it. But I think it's kind of like interesting and weird enough to sort of warrant putting on the shelf, if you see what I mean. And the Caol Ila. Drop of water with it, you know, and we're more sort of classical Caol Ila. Without water, we're more smoky, barbecuey kind of meatiness. So it's kind of how do you take your poison at the end of the day. And for me, I personally prefer it with a little splash of water. But you know, that's the thing I love about cask strength whiskies, that kind of versatility. The fact that, you know, you might not like it one way or you might like it the other way. Depends how you kind of go, I suppose. Anyway, enough of that. All I can say is, again, some cracking whiskies that have been bottled by Brave New Spirits. If you've not tasted any of their whiskey, check back on. I've done about 2 earlier episodes of the show on their stuff, so and some of their voodoo stuff, which you may or may not be able to get hold of now, was very impressive, and certainly some of these were very impressive. So yeah, great lineup. So all that's left to say is I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the show. Good afternoon and good dramming.